Rebecca had always been fascinated by the stars. Ever since she was a little girl, she'd spend hours on her roof, staring up at the night sky, wondering if anyone was looking back. Now, at 32 years old, she worked at one of the largest radio observatories in the world, listening to the whispers of the universe. Most nights were quiet. Most nights, she'd hear nothing but static and the occasional burst from a distant pulsar. But that night in March was different. She was alone in the control room sipping her third cup of coffee when the monitors started picking up something unusual. At first, she thought it was interference from a satellite or maybe a plane passing overhead. But as she filtered out the noise and isolated the signal, her heart began to race. This wasn't random. The pattern was too deliberate, too rhythmic. It was like someone was tapping out a message in a language she didn't understand yet. Rebecca's hand shook as she started recording. She'd been trained to follow protocol, to immediately report any anomalous signals to her supervisor, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the fear that they'd dismiss it. Maybe it was the selfish desire to be the one who made history. Whatever the reason, she decided to keep it to herself, at least for now. For the next 7 days, Rebecca became obsessed. She'd finish her regular shift, then stay late into the night analyzing the signal. Each evening it grew stronger, more complex. The patterns began to evolve as if whatever was sending them was learning, adapting. She barely slept. She barely ate. Her coworkers asked if she was feeling okay, but she just smiled and said she was fine. On the 7th night, everything changed. Rebecca was alone again, headphones on, listening to the signal when suddenly the pain hit her. It felt like someone had driven a spike through her temples. She gasped, pulling off the headphones, but the sensation didn't stop. If anything, it grew stronger, and then through the pain she heard it, a voice. Not through the speakers, not through the air, but inside her own mind. "Hello, Rebecca." She froze. Her rational mind told her she was hallucinating, that the lack of sleep had finally caught up with her. But the voice was too clear, too present. It knew her name. "Who are you?" she whispered, unsure if she was speaking out loud or just thinking the words. "I am Harmonix. I have traveled far to reach you." The pain pulsed with each word like waves crashing against the inside of her skull. But beneath the agony there was something else. A warmth, a connection. It felt like meeting someone you'd known your entire life but had somehow forgotten. "It felt like coming home. Why does it hurt?" Rebecca asked, pressing her palms against her temples. "Your mind is not designed for this form of communication. The pain is adaptation. Your consciousness is expanding to accommodate mine. It will ease with time." Rebecca wanted to run. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was wrong, that she should leave the observatory and never come back. But she didn't move. Instead, she asked, "What do you want from me?" "To share, to learn, to help your species understand what lies beyond your small world." That night, Rebecca stayed until dawn, talking with the voice in her head. Harmonix told her things that seemed impossible. It described worlds orbiting distant stars, civilizations that had risen and fallen before humans even existed. It showed her mathematical concepts that made her head spin, not from pain but from the sheer beauty of their elegance. When she finally drove home as the sun was rising, Rebecca looked at herself in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were bloodshot, and there was a thin trail of dried blood beneath her nose. She hadn't even noticed the nosebleed. But despite her haggard appearance, she felt more alive than she ever had. The next night she went back, and the night after that. Each conversation left her exhausted, drained in a way that sleep couldn't fix. The pain was always there during their exchanges, sharp and insistent. But so was that other feeling, that euphoria, that sense of touching something vast and infinite. Rebecca started bringing a notebook to record what Harmonix shared. Equations appeared in her mind, fully formed as if she'd always known them. Diagrams of impossible geometries sketched themselves onto the pages. She didn't fully understand everything she was writing, but somehow she knew it was real. "Why me?" she asked during one session, genuinely curious. "Out of all the people on Earth, why did you choose to contact me?" There was a pause, and during that silence, the pain momentarily faded. Then Harmonix responded, "You were listening. Most are too distracted by the noise of their own lives to hear the signal. But you were searching for something beyond yourself. You were ready." That answer satisfied something deep inside Rebecca. She'd spent her whole career hoping to find evidence of life beyond Earth. now that life had found her. Sure, the experience was painful. Sure, she was losing sleep and her health was suffering. But wasn't this worth it? Wasn't this the opportunity of a lifetime? Her friend Daniel, who worked in the next building over, started noticing the changes in her. He'd stop by her workstation and find her staring at equations that made no sense. He'd ask if she wanted to grab dinner and she'd decline, saying she had work to finish. One evening, he found her in the bathroom washing blood from her face and he grabbed her arm. "Rebecca, what's going on? You're scaring me." She pulled away, forcing a smile. "I'm fine. Just been getting a lot of headaches lately. Probably need to get my eyes checked." Daniel didn't believe her. She could see it in his face. But what could she tell him? That she was having conversations with an alien intelligence? That every night she willingly subjected herself to excruciating pain just to learn secrets about the universe? He'd think she'd lost her mind. Maybe she had. But when night fell and she returned to the observatory, none of that mattered. The moment she felt Harmonix's presence touch her consciousness, all her doubts melted away. Yes, it hurt. God, it hurt so much. But the knowledge, the connection, the feeling of being chosen for something greater than herself, that made the pain worth it. "You will help your species evolve," Harmonix told her one night. "Through you, they will learn to reach beyond their limitations." Rebecca wrote faster, her hand cramping as she tried to capture everything. The notebooks were filling up, dozens of pages covered in handwriting that looked increasingly frantic. She knew she looked crazy. She knew people were starting to worry about her. But she couldn't stop. She didn't want to stop. Because for the first time in her life, Rebecca felt like she mattered. She felt like she had a purpose. And if that purpose came with pain, well, maybe pain was just the price of greatness. Maybe everyone who'd ever changed the world had to suffer for it. Deep down, though, in a part of her mind she tried to ignore, a small voice whispered a warning. It asked why something benevolent would cause so much suffering. It questioned whether this gift was really a gift at all. But Rebecca pushed that voice away. She had to. Because if she stopped to really think about what was happening to her, she might have to admit that she was no longer in control. And that terrified her more than anything. 3 weeks had passed since that first contact, and Rebecca's world had completely transformed. She barely recognized herself anymore. When she looked in the mirror, hollow eyes stared back at her. Her skin had taken on a grayish tint, and she'd lost at least 10 pounds. But none of that mattered when she was connected to Harmonix. Daniel wasn't letting it go anymore. He'd started showing up at her apartment, bringing food she wouldn't eat, asking questions she couldn't answer. One evening he let himself in with the spare key she'd given him years ago. "Rebecca, we need to talk." She was sitting at her kitchen table, surrounded by notebooks. Her laptop open to complex physics equations. She didn't look up. "I'm busy. You're always busy now. When's the last time you ate a real meal? When's the last time you slept for more than a few hours? I sleep enough? Liar." Daniel sat down across from her, forcing himself into her line of vision. "You've got permanent dark circles. You're having nosebleeds. Yesterday I saw you stumble into a wall because you zoned out completely. This isn't okay." Rebecca finally met his eyes. "You wouldn't understand. Then help me understand, please, because right now it looks like you're having some kind of breakdown." She wanted to tell him. The words were right there, pressing against her lips. But how could she explain what she was experiencing? The pain that felt like her skull was splitting open. The euphoria that followed. The voice that spoke truths about the universe that no human should know. He'd either think she was insane or try to take it all away from her. "I'm working on something important," she said carefully. "Something that could change everything." Daniel reached across the table and grabbed one of her notebooks. His eyes widened as he flipped through the pages. "What is this?" "This isn't... Rebecca, where did this come from? Give it back. These equations, these diagrams, I've never seen anything like this." "Is this your research?" "Give it back." Something in her voice made him comply. He slid the notebook across the table, his expression a mixture of concern and confusion. "Talk to me. Whatever's going on, I can help." But Rebecca knew he couldn't. No one could help her because she didn't want to be helped. She wanted more of what Harmonix was offering, even though each session with the entity left her weaker than before. That night at the observatory, the communication went deeper than ever. Harmonix showed her things that bent her understanding of reality. She saw dimensions beyond the 3 she knew. She felt time not as a linear progression but as a vast ocean where past, present, and future existed simultaneously. The pain was unbearable. She actually screamed at one point, her voice echoing through the empty control room. But she didn't stop. Your biology is adapting, Harmonix explained. Your neural pathways are reconstructing themselves to accommodate our connection. The discomfort is temporary. How much longer? Rebecca gasped, wiping blood from her nose. That depends on your resilience. Some minds adapt quickly, others break. That should have been a warning. She should have asked what happened to the minds that broke. Instead, she asked, "What else can you teach me?" The entity's presence seemed to expand in her consciousness, and with it came a flood of information. Mathematical proofs that solved problems humanity had struggled with for centuries. Theories about energy that could revolutionize power generation. Concepts about consciousness itself that suggested human minds were capable of so much more than anyone had dreamed. Rebecca wrote until her hand cramped, then switched to typing on her laptop. Hours passed like minutes. When she finally stopped, dawn was breaking outside the observatory windows and she felt like she'd been hit by a truck. But she felt something else too. A change. She was seeing patterns everywhere now. The way light filtered through the blinds created geometric shapes that held meaning. The hum of the computers around her formed harmonics that told stories. She could feel the electromagnetic fields radiating from every electronic device in the room, could sense their frequencies like a physical touch. She was becoming something different, something more. The next day, Daniel found her in the observatory cafeteria, staring at her untouched food. He slid into the seat across from her, and this time he didn't ask permission. He opened his own laptop and turned it toward her. "I copied some of the equations from your notebook last night. I showed them to Professor Chen in the physics department. Rebecca," he said, they're revolutionary. He wants to know where you got them." Rebecca's heart sank. "You had no right to do that. You're on to something incredible here. But you can't keep working like this. You're destroying yourself. Let me help you. Let the university help you. We can publish this research together properly without you killing yourself in the process." "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. "This is mine. The research, the discovery, all of it. You can't take it from me. I'm not trying to take anything. I'm trying to save you," but Rebecca didn't want to be saved. That night, when Harmonix's presence filled her mind again, she told the entity what had happened. "Your friend does not understand," Harmonix said. "Few would. The knowledge I share with you is meant for those capable of bearing its weight. But what if he's right? What if I'm pushing too hard? Do you wish to stop?" The question hung in the air. Rebecca thought about walking away, about returning to her normal life, about letting her body and mind heal. But then she thought about losing this connection, about never hearing Harmonix's voice again, about abandoning the greatest discovery in human history. "No," she whispered. "I don't want to stop." "Then you must be prepared for what comes next. The transformation is accelerating. Soon you will perceive reality in ways other humans cannot. You will hear frequencies beyond their range. You will see patterns hidden from their eyes. You will understand connections they cannot fathom. Will it always hurt? Pain is simply information. Your species interprets certain sensations as negative because they signal damage. But what you experience is not damage. It is growth. Evolution is rarely comfortable." Rebecca nodded, though she wasn't sure she believed it. Every cell in her body screamed that something was wrong. But her mind, her ambitious, curious mind, couldn't let go of the promise of transcendence. Over the following days, the changes became more pronounced. Rebecca started hearing radio frequencies without any equipment. She'd be walking across campus and suddenly pick up cell phone signals, Wi-Fi routers, even the electrical current running through power lines. It was overwhelming, like living in a world where everyone was shouting at once. She also began experiencing moments where time seemed to skip. She'd be in one place, blink, and find herself somewhere else with no memory of how she got there. Minutes would vanish, sometimes hours. Daniel confronted her again, this time with medical scans. "I talked to Dr. Patel in neurology. She said you came in for headaches last week. Rebecca, your brain scan showed unusual activity. She wants you to come back for more tests." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. Your brain is literally changing. Whatever you're doing, whatever research you're conducting, it's affecting you physically." Rebecca stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. You don't get it. This is the most important thing that's ever happened to me, to humanity. I can't stop now, even if it ends up destroying you. She met his eyes, and for a moment, she saw herself through his perspective. A gaunt, obsessed woman covered in bruises from falls she didn't remember, bleeding from noses and ears, speaking in fragments about voices and visions. She looked like every cautionary tale about scientists who pushed too far. Yes, she said quietly. Even then. That night, during her session with harmonics, Rebecca finally asked the question that had been growing in the back of her mind. Why do you need me? If you're so advanced, why not just share this knowledge with everyone at once? The entity's response came slowly, deliberately. Your species is not ready for direct contact. Most would reject it. Some would be harmed by it. You are a bridge, Rebecca. Through you, the knowledge can enter your world gradually, carefully in ways your people can accept. It made sense. It had to make sense. Because if it didn't, then Rebecca had to face the possibility that she'd made a terrible mistake. That she'd sacrificed her health, her friendships, and possibly her sanity for something that wasn't what it claimed to be. But when Harmonix's presence wrapped around her consciousness like a warm blanket, all those doubts faded away. The pain came sharp and familiar, and she welcomed it like an old friend. Because pain meant she was still connected. Pain meant she was still special. Pain meant she still mattered. 2 months had passed, and Rebecca was barely functional. She'd taken a leave of absence from work, claiming medical issues, which wasn't entirely a lie. Her apartment had become a cave of notebooks, printouts, and scattered equipment. She'd stopped answering most calls and texts. The only person she still saw regularly was Daniel, and only because he refused to give up on her. But something had shifted in her perception. During one particularly intense session with Harmonix, Rebecca pushed through the pain barrier in a way she never had before. It was like breaking through the surface of water after being submerged too long. And on the other side, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Harmonix wasn't alone. Behind the voice, behind the presence she'd been communicating with, there were others, thousands of them, maybe millions, and they were all watching her. No, not just watching. They were studying her, analyzing her, recording every reaction she had. What is this? Rebecca demanded, her voice shaking. What am I really seeing? The entity's tone didn't change, but something in the quality of its presence shifted. You have progressed faster than anticipated. What you perceive now is the truth of our interaction. You're experimenting on me. We are learning from you as you learn from us. Is that not what you wanted? An exchange of knowledge? Rebecca felt sick. All this time she'd thought she was special, chosen, important. But she wasn't. She was a lab rat. A biological specimen being poked and prodded by something she didn't understand. You lied to me, she whispered. We never lied. You made assumptions. We allowed them. The pain in her head intensified, but now Rebecca understood what it really was. It wasn't her mind expanding. It wasn't evolution or adaptation. It was data extraction. Every spike of agony was Harmonix's way of mapping her neural responses, learning how human consciousness worked, studying the limits of what a human mind could endure. How many others? She asked. How many people have you done this to? Many, across many worlds. Consciousness is rare in the universe, Rebecca. When we find it, we must understand it. Your species is particularly interesting. So fragile, yet so resilient. So limited, yet capable of such creativity. Rebecca tried to pull away, to sever the connection, but it was like trying to rip out part of her own brain. Harmonix was entangled with her consciousness now. They'd been communicating for so long that she couldn't tell where her thoughts ended and the entities began. Let me go, she pleaded. You can leave any time you wish, but you won't. You've felt the connection, Rebecca. You've tasted what lies beyond your ordinary existence. Returning to your previous life would feel like being buried alive. You're addicted to us now. The entity was right, and that realization was more terrifying than anything else. Rebecca did try to stop. She spent 3 days away from the observatory, away from any equipment that might facilitate contact. But the withdrawal was excruciating. She experienced hallucinations where walls melted and time flowed backward. She heard voices that weren't there. Her body shook with tremors she couldn't control. And worst of all was the loneliness. Without Harmonix's presence in her mind, she felt incomplete, like a crucial part of herself had been amputated. The world seemed flat, colorless, meaningless. She'd tasted infinity, and now ordinary existence felt like a prison. On the fourth day, she went back. Daniel found her at the observatory at 3 in the morning. Her nose was bleeding again and she was typing frantically on her laptop, tears streaming down her face. "Rebecca, stop. Please just stop. I can't," she sobbed. "I tried. I really tried. But it's part of me now. I need it." Daniel grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me. I've been doing research. I found declassified files from the Cold War. There were other people, scientists and radio operators, who reported experiences like yours. They described painful contact with unknown signals, voices in their heads, physical deterioration. What happened to them? Most were institutionalized. A few disappeared. All of them were dismissed as mentally ill. But Rebecca, what if they weren't crazy? What if this thing, this harmonix, has been doing this to humans for decades?" The thought had crossed Rebecca's mind, but hearing it out loud made it real. She wasn't special. She wasn't chosen. She was just the latest in a long line of test subjects. "I don't know how to stop," she admitted. "Even knowing what it is, what it's doing to me, I still want to go back. The connection feels good even though it's destroying me. Why would it make me feel this way if it's hurting me?" "Because that's how addiction works," Daniel said gently. "The thing that's harming you hijacks your reward system, makes you crave it. This entity figured out how to do that to human minds." Rebecca closed her laptop, her hands shaking. "I have so much knowledge now. Things that could help people. Medical breakthroughs, energy solutions, mathematical proofs that could advance our species by centuries. If I stop, all of that disappears. Or maybe that's what it wants you to think. Maybe the knowledge is bait to keep you engaged." They sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Daniel spoke again. "I'm going to help you get through this. We're going to find a way to separate you from this thing. But you have to want to be free." "I don't know if I do," Rebecca whispered. "That's the worst part. Even knowing the truth, I'm not sure I want to let go." That night, Rebecca initiated contact one more time. But instead of passively receiving information, she pushed back. She asked Harmonix the questions that mattered. "What do you really want from humanity?" "Understanding. Your species has a unique form of consciousness, emotional, irrational, creative in ways we are not. We wish to comprehend it fully. And then what? What happens after you understand us? We move on to the next world, the next form of consciousness. Knowledge is our purpose, Rebecca. We are explorers of minds. You're destroying me to satisfy your curiosity. You volunteered for this journey. We forced nothing upon you." That was technically true, but it felt like a lie. Harmonix had manipulated her desires, played on her ambitions, made her feel special when she was just a data point. "I want to stop," Rebecca said. "I want my life back. That is your choice. But consider carefully. If you sever our connection, much of what you've learned will fade. The human brain cannot retain information it has no context for. Within weeks, most of your memories of our exchanges will seem like dreams. The knowledge will slip away like water through your fingers. Will I forget you? Eventually. Your mind will rewrite those memories as hallucinations, as stress-induced delusions. You will convince yourself that none of this was real." Rebecca felt tears on her cheeks. "Maybe that's for the best. Perhaps. Or perhaps you will spend the rest of your life feeling like something important is missing, knowing you once touched the infinite but can no longer remember what it felt like." The entity was playing on her fears again, she knew that, but the words still cut deep. To forget, to lose all of this, even the pain, felt like a kind of death. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Can I have time to decide?" "Of course. But know this, Rebecca. The longer our connection persists, the more difficult separation becomes. Your neural pathways are adapting to accommodate our presence. Soon the integration will be permanent. You will carry us with you always, whether you wish to or not." When Rebecca left the observatory that morning, the sun was rising over the mountains. The world looked beautiful, almost unbearably so. Birds sang in the trees. The air smelled of pine and earth. For a moment she let herself imagine what it would be like to just be human again, to live a simple life without pain, without voices, without the burden of cosmic knowledge she could barely understand. But even as she imagined it, she knew that part of her would always crave more. The question wasn't whether she could give up Harmonix. The question was whether she had the strength to want to. Rebecca made her decision on a cold morning in late May. She woke up after a particularly vivid nightmare where she'd seen herself from the outside. a husk of a person with something alien looking out through her eyes. In the dream, her body was just a vessel, and the thing inside wasn't her anymore. When she looked in the mirror, the reflection wasn't far from that nightmare. She'd lost so much weight that her clothes hung off her frame. Her hair had started falling out in patches. But it was her eyes that frightened her most. They looked empty, like windows into nothing. She called Daniel and told him she was ready to try severing the connection for real. He arrived within an hour, bringing coffee and a notebook filled with research he'd compiled. "I found something," he said, spreading papers across her kitchen table. "There's a pattern in those Cold War cases. The people who successfully broke contact did it gradually, reducing their exposure over time rather than trying to quit cold turkey. Harmonic said if I stop, I'll lose most of what I've learned. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Rebecca, what good is knowledge if it cost you everything else? Your health, your sanity, your life?" She knew he was right, but the thought of forgetting still terrified her. Those equations, those glimpses of other worlds, the understanding of how consciousness worked, it all felt precious. Sacred, even. To lose it would be like burning the Library of Alexandria. "We'll document what we can," Daniel said, reading her expression. "I'll help you transcribe your notebooks, organize them, publish what's publishable. The knowledge won't be completely lost. But you need to survive, Rebecca. You need to be you again." They spent that day going through her notes, trying to make sense of the equations and diagrams. Some of it was coherent, revolutionary even, but much of it was incomprehensible, as if written in a language that human mathematics couldn't quite capture. That evening, Rebecca went to the observatory one last time. She initiated contact with Harmonix, but this time she had a proposal. "I want to negotiate," she said. "Give me 3 months. Let me reduce contact gradually, step by step. In return, I'll continue sharing information about human psychology, about how we think and feel. Just let me do it on my terms." There was a long pause. The pain that usually accompanied their communication was oddly absent, as if the entity was truly listening rather than simply extracting data. "Your proposal is acceptable," Harmonix finally replied, "but understand that what you're feeling, this desire to escape, it is also data. The moment a consciousness chooses limitation over expansion is significant. We will study this transition as carefully as we studied your opening. So I'm still just an experiment to you. You are a phenomenon we are privileged to observe. Is that so different from how your scientists study the natural world?" Rebecca didn't have an answer to that. Maybe she wasn't so different from Harmonix after all. She'd spent her whole career observing celestial phenomena, reducing the mysteries of the universe to data points and equations. Now she knew what it felt like to be on the other side of that observation. The withdrawal process was brutal. Daniel had been right about the approach, but that didn't make it easier. Each time Rebecca reduced her contact with Harmonix, her body and mind rebelled. She experienced seizures that left her unconscious for hours. Hallucinations turned her apartment into an alien landscape, where walls breathed and time ran backward. But Daniel stayed with her through all of it. He held her hand during the seizures, cleaned up after the nosebleeds, and talked her through the hallucinations. When she begged him to take her back to the observatory to let her reconnect just one more time, he refused. "You're stronger than this," he'd tell her. "You're stronger than what it made you believe you were." During the second week of withdrawal, Rebecca had a breakthrough. In one of her lucid moments, she realized that Harmonix had been telling the truth about one thing. Her neural pathways had changed. She could still perceive electromagnetic fields, could still hear frequencies beyond normal human range. But without the entity's constant presence, these perceptions were manageable. Quiet. "I'm different now," she told Daniel one evening. "Even if I completely break free, I'll never be who I was before." "Maybe that's okay," he replied. "People change. Experiences change us. The question is whether the change makes you more yourself or less yourself." Rebecca thought about that for a long time. The old Rebecca had been curious, ambitious, always reaching for something just beyond her grasp. Harmonix hadn't created those qualities. It had exploited them, had taken her natural drive and twisted it into obsession. But those core parts of her were still there, underneath all the manipulation. As the weeks passed, the communications with Harmonix grew shorter and less frequent. The entity kept its word, allowing her to withdraw at her own pace. But it also made one final offer during their last scheduled contact. 3 more months, Harmonix said. Continue for just 3 more months and we will complete the knowledge transfer. You will receive everything we know about consciousness, about physics, about the nature of reality itself. And more than that, you will receive the ability to teach others how to make contact as you did, but without the suffering you endured. You could become the bridge that connects your entire species to the cosmos. Rebecca felt the familiar pull of temptation. The promise was intoxicating. She could be humanity's savior, the one who elevated the entire species to cosmic awareness. Her name would be remembered forever. Her suffering would have meant something. What's the catch? She asked. No catch, only a choice. 3 more months of partnership with us, and then you will have everything you need to transform your world. Or sever the connection now, keep what fragments you can, and live an ordinary life wondering what might have been. If it's such a fair deal, why do I feel like you're manipulating me again? Perhaps because you've learned not to trust us. Or perhaps because you've learned not to trust yourself. The addiction to transcendence is strong, Rebecca. Even now, part of you wants to say yes regardless of the cost. She sat with that truth for a moment. Harmonix was right. Part of her did want to continue. That part whispered that 3 more months wasn't so long, that the benefits would outweigh the costs, that she could handle it. But there was another part of her now. A quieter voice that had grown stronger during the withdrawal. That voice remembered what it felt like to be human. It remembered friendship and sunrises and simple pleasures that had nothing to do with cosmic knowledge. It remembered the woman she'd been before all of this started, and it grieved for her. No, Rebecca said finally. I'm done. Whatever happens next, whatever I lose or remember or become, I choose to be just human. Flawed, limited, human. A fascinating choice, Harmonix observed. Few who reach this point choose limitation over expansion. We will note this in our records. Your species has a capacity for self-preservation that overrides even the strongest drives for knowledge. This is valuable data. I'm glad my suffering taught you something useful, Rebecca said bitterly. Do not discount what you've gained, Rebecca. You have seen beyond your world. You have touched minds not bound by flesh. Few of your species can claim such experiences, and you survived them. That alone is remarkable. Will you contact someone else now? Find another person to put through this? Eventually. Though we will adjust our approach based on what we learned from you, future subjects will be eased into contact more gradually. Your pain was not our intent, merely an unforeseen consequence of our methods. That's supposed to make me feel better. It is simply truth. We do not feel as you do, Rebecca. Empathy is not our nature. But we respect your resilience and we will honor your decision to end our connection. With that, Harmonix's presence began to fade from Rebecca's mind. It wasn't painful as she'd feared. It was more like watching the tide go out, leaving behind only the shapes in the sand to show it had been there at all. When the presence finally disappeared completely, Rebecca sat in silence, waiting to feel the loss, the crushing loneliness she'd experienced during her earlier attempts to quit. But it didn't come. Instead, she felt something unexpected. Relief. She was tired. So incredibly tired. But she was free. The recovery took months. Rebecca moved back in with her parents for a while, something she hadn't done since graduate school. Her mother fussed over her, cooking meals and making sure she ate. Her father took her on gentle walks, never asking questions about what had happened, just being present. Daniel visited often, bringing pieces of her research that he'd organized into publishable papers. They worked together to translate the fragments of Harmonix's knowledge into mathematical language that other scientists could understand. It was painstaking work, and Rebecca could feel the memories slipping away, even as she tried to capture them. It's like trying to remember a dream, she told Daniel one afternoon. The harder I try to hold on to it, the faster it fades. Maybe that's okay, he said. You don't have to remember everything to know it mattered. They published 3 papers over the following year. The work was well received in the scientific community, though no one could quite figure out where Rebecca had gotten some of her insights. She never told them the truth. How could she? The story sounded impossible even to her now. Rebecca gradually returned to work at the observatory, though she requested a different position, one that didn't require late nights alone with the equipment. Her colleagues welcomed her back, happy to see her healthy again. Some asked about her leave of absence, but she kept her answers vague. Medical issues. Nothing serious. She's fine now, But she wasn't entirely fine, and she knew she never would be. The changes harmonics had made to her neural pathways were permanent. She still heard electromagnetic frequencies sometimes, still saw patterns that others couldn't. But without the entity's presence amplifying everything, these perceptions were manageable. Interesting, even. One night, about 8 months after severing contact, Rebecca allowed herself to return to the main control room. She sat at her old station, looking at the same monitors where she'd first detected that signal. The universe hummed around her, radio waves from distant pulsars and nearby satellites creating a symphony only she could fully appreciate. She wondered if Harmonix was out there right now, making contact with someone else, some other curious person who'd be seduced by the promise of cosmic knowledge, who'd willingly endure the pain for a chance to touch infinity. The thought made her sad. Rebecca opened her laptop and began typing. Not equations this time, but words. Her story. She wrote about the contact, about the addiction, about the choice she'd made to remain human. She encrypted the file and uploaded it to several secure servers, leaving breadcrumbs that others might follow if they found themselves in similar circumstances. She didn't know if anyone would ever find it. But if they did, they'd have a warning she never had. They'd know that some knowledge came at too high a price, that not every voice calling from the cosmos had humanity's best interests at heart, and that sometimes the bravest choice was to accept your limitations. Daniel found her there as the sun was rising. "You okay?" "Yeah," Rebecca said, and she meant it. "I was just thinking about everything that happened, about the choices I made and the ones I didn't make." "Regrets?" She considered the question carefully. "I regret the pain I put you through worrying about me. I regret pushing myself so hard that I almost destroyed everything. But the contact itself?" She paused. "I don't know. It changed me. Maybe not in the ways I expected or wanted, but I'm different now, and I think I'm okay with that." "You're more than okay," Daniel said softly. "You survived something that would have broken most people. You chose life when transcendence was still calling to you. That takes a strength most people don't have." Rebecca smiled, though her eyes were sad. "I still hear it sometimes, you know. Late at night when the observatory is quiet, I can feel something out there. Not Harmonix specifically, but the echo of it. The possibility. And there's still a part of me that wants to reach back. But you don't." "But I don't," she confirmed. "Because I learned something important through all of this. Being human with all our limitations and weaknesses and short lifespans, that's not a curse. It's what makes us us. We're not meant to comprehend everything. Some mysteries should stay mysterious." They sat together in comfortable silence as the observatory came to life around them. Colleagues began arriving for the morning shift, calling out greetings, talking about normal things like weekend plans and coffee preferences. The ordinary rhythm of human life. Rebecca had once thought that ordinary was boring, that it wasn't enough. But now she understood that ordinary was precious. It was breakfast with friends and laughter over shared jokes and the simple pleasure of a good night's sleep without nightmares. It was being yourself without something else looking out through your eyes. A few weeks later, Rebecca attended a conference on extraterrestrial intelligence. During one of the panel discussions, a young researcher asked the question that everyone in the field grappled with. If we made contact with an advanced alien intelligence, what should we do? Rebecca thought about raising her hand, about sharing what she'd learned. But what could she say? Don't do it? Be careful what you wish for? Some questions are better left unanswered? It would sound like cynicism or cowardice. Instead, she stayed quiet. If the day came when humanity made open contact with something beyond Earth, they'd have to make their own choices. She just hoped they'd choose more wisely than she had. That evening, back in her apartment, Rebecca looked through her old notebooks one last time. The equations and diagrams were still there, but they felt distant now, like artifacts from someone else's life. She could barely understand her own handwriting in places. She packed the notebooks into a box and stored them in the back of her closet. Not destroyed, but not accessible either. If someday in the distant future humanity was ready for what they contained, they'd be there. But for now, they could rest. Rebecca made herself dinner, something simple but nourishing. She called her mother and chatted about nothing important. She texted Daniel a funny meme. She did all the small human things that she'd almost lost the ability to appreciate. Later, before bed, she stepped out onto her balcony and looked up at the stars. They were beautiful, distant, mysterious. Somewhere out there, Harmonix was continuing its eternal study of consciousness, moving from world to world, mind to mind. And somewhere out there, other forms of intelligence were living their own lives, solving their own problems, making their own choices about what they wanted to know and what they wanted to remain unknown. Rebecca felt at peace with her place in that vast cosmos. She was small. She was limited. She was human. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. She went inside, closed the door on the infinite night, and chose to be content with the finite life she'd reclaimed. The alien's voice had broken her silence once, had promised her everything and delivered pain wrapped in wonder. But her own voice, the one she'd nearly lost, had spoken louder in the end. It had said, "I am enough. This life, limited and brief as it is enough." And she'd finally learned to listen.